Very dear devotees, welcome back again to our ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, we are continuing with our series on Lord Krishna's Rasa Dance with the gopis of Vrindavan. As we mentioned several times, it is a deep subject matter to be approached cautiously under the guidance of Srila Prabhupada and our previous acharyas. But we must also remember the words of Shukadeva Goswami, who, while describing the Rasa Dance in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, clearly says that by hearing the transcendental nature of the Rasa Leela, one can, quote, quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. Such Hari Katha, therefore, is a most valuable possession. It's like a rare jewel. You could say this katha is a priceless ornament. The great medieval commentator, Shihari Suri, he writes very beautifully, quote, "For expressing good fortune, a chaste lady wears the mark of kumkuma on her forehead, indicating that she's happily married. What need is there of any other ornaments? Similarly, the sole ornament of my good fortune is the Lord present in the tilak on the forehead of my words, while reciting his glories. What need is there of any other ornament?" Unquote. So beautiful. So in our last lecture, we concluded with the final verse of the Gopis song, the famous Gopi Gita. You may remember that as soon as the gopis finished singing, Krishna could no longer resist their desire to be with him again. And he came out of hiding. He came out of his hiding place in the forest at, it's down by the banks of the Yamuna, at Govindaghat, where he had been listening to their most perfect prema sankirtan. We described that in the last class. The gopis singing was the most perfect prema sankirtan. And as he appeared before the gopis, I was reading that out of humility, Krishna wrapped his golden upper cloth around his neck. The acharyas say that, quote, "Ashamed for having abandoned those who love him most, he stood before the gopis with a bashful look on his face." Unquote. Now, the Gopi Bhadra was the first to see Krishna coming out of his hiding place. And as she saw him, she just spontaneously called out, "Krishna, Krishna, Krishna." And then she fell silent. And hearing his name, the other gopis, they looked around and they saw Krishna standing before them. Shukadeva Goswami describes in a very special form, manmata man mataha, meaning that form, how would you say, the one who bewilders Cupid. The one who bewilders Cupid. So in this way, Krishna fully displayed his most enchanting sweetness to make the gopis forget their sorrow. And when the gopis came forward to welcome him, there's a description how each of them individually related to Krishna. It's described that Chandravali held Krishna's hand, Shima put his arm on her shoulder, Padma accepted the Lord's chewed betel nut, Shaibya placed his feet on her body, and Radharani, it's described, biting her lips in anger, frowned at him. Because he abandoned her. He left with her from the Rasa Dance, and then he abandoned her, so she was upset. And Lalita Saki, she drank in his sweetness with her eyes. And Vishaka Saki took the image of Krishna into her heart and continuously embraced him there. Then Krishna took all the gopis with him to a place down by the Yamuna river, which he thought would be best suited for the Rasa Dance. And there he indicated that they should all sit down in the soft sand. You know, we're going to do the Rasa Dance again, so just sit down now in the soft sand. And at that point, each and every gopi made a seat for Krishna with their kumkuma-stained veils, it's described, from their heads. And Krishna, who's the master of all mystic powers, expanded himself into as many forms as there were seats provided by the gopis. And he sat on all of them at once. But by his mystic potency, each gopi thought that Krishna was only sitting with her. Actually, he sat on every single veil, every single seat. But each gopi thought, oh, Krishna's only with me. Now, each of these gopis, they worshipped Krishna with three things, it's described. They worshiped Krishna with their smiles, they worshiped Krishna with their glances, and they worshiped Krishna with betel nuts. That's so interesting. But the acharyas say that while doing so, they harbored a slight anger towards him for having treated them so unkindly by leaving the Rasa Dance, and they all wondered if he really loved them. So at that point, it's a famous part of the Bhagavatam actually, at that point they began questioning Krishna about the dealings between lovers. They said, Krishna, please tell us about the following types of lovers. Those who reciprocate affection, those who show affection to everyone, and those who do not show affection to anyone, these different types of lovers. So Krishna, he replied, he actually analyzes these three categories of lovers, but he concludes that he himself always, without exception, reciprocates the love of those who love him. But to explain why he had left the gopis during the Rasa Dance, he said, and I'll quote here, "But the reason I do not immediately reciprocate the affection of living beings, even when they worship me, O gopis, is that I want to intensify their loving devotion. Then they become like a poor man who has gained some wealth and then lost it, and who thus becomes anxious about it and can think of nothing else," unquote. Bhagavatam. Then Krishna, to acknowledge their exceptional love for him, he spoke one of the most famous verses found in our Gaudiya Vaishnava literature. It's so famous. And I'll quote the Lord. "I am not able to repay my debt for your spotless service, even within a lifetime of Brahma. Your connection with me is beyond reproach. You have worshipped me, cutting off all domestic ties, which are difficult to break. Therefore, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation." So the acharyas say that hearing these loving words of Krishna, the gopis are satisfied. They're satisfied that, yes, he does love us. He loves us more than anyone's ever been loved before. And they also appreciated that by dealing with them in the way he had revealed the unique and special love of his eternal consort, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani. When he left the Rasa Dance, he took her. And when they saw her, later abandoned by him, they could see how deep was her separation from Krishna. So through the whole pastime, Krishna had revealed the unique and special love that his eternal consort, Shrimati Radharani, had for him. So with this done, This conversation is over in Bhagavatam. It was time for the Rasa dance to continue. Now the Agama scriptures, that's a certain portion of the Vedas, the Agama scriptures say that there were actually 3 billion gopis at the Rasa dance. And amongst them, 16,000 were prominent. And out of them, 1,000 were more prominent. And out of them, 8 were most prominent. And of these 8, Radharani and Chandravali were the best. And of these 2, Srimati Radharani is accepted by the scriptures, by the saints, and by the gopis themselves as the foremost consort of Sri Krishna. So this particular Rasa dance, because we have mentioned before, there's different types of Rasa dances at different times of the year in different places. But this particular Rasa dance was comprised of a large circle of gopis with Radha and Krishna in the center. However, our acharyas differ as to how Krishna later appeared between the gopis, how he manifested himself, and in how many forms he did manifest himself. Those 3 things. The acharyas differ. There's different opinions, different visions. How Krishna appeared between the gopis, how he manifested himself, and in how many forms he manifested himself. Regarding Krishna appearing between the gopis, Srila Prabhupada writes that Krishna expanded himself into many forms. That's what Prabhupada says. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes, one Krishna moved rapidly amongst the gopis. Whatever the case, by Yogamaya's influence, each gopi thought Krishna was by her side alone. Now regarding the second one, regarding how many forms Krishna assumed, Srila Prabhupada says that Lord Krishna, quote, placed his hands on the shoulders of the gopis on both sides of him. Now if you think about it, this could mean one of 2 things. Number one, that Krishna danced with each pair of gopis, or Krishna was alone with each gopi. But again, from the gopis' point of view, Krishna was with each of them. So now, pointing to the vast expanse of beach along the Yamuna river there, Krishna then said to the 3 billion gopis, quote, although you are many, can you please make a circle upon this beautiful dancing stage? But the acharyas, they say, it's really interesting that the gopis were afraid that by doing as Krishna asked, they would again be separated from him. So they said, but Krishna, if we stand in a circle, we will be too far from you, and we will lose our enthusiasm for this dance festival that you have arranged. So wanting to encourage them, Krishna said, don't worry, girls, as I stand at the center of the circle with Radha, I will also stand beside each of you. Now those words convinced the gopis. And joining hands, they formed a circle. Now in the Krishna book, which is the first book which actually introduced us to the Rasa dance, to Rasa Leela, very early in the movement, we read that when Krishna first called these gopis into the forest with his venu, with his flute, you may remember in their haste, many of them came improperly dressed. They just were so eager to come, they just put the clothes on in different assorted ways. And as the pastime unfolded, as they were dancing and then Krishna left and they looked for him, it's described their clothes became further disheveled. So at this point, I read, Yogamaya invisibly dressed and ornamented each gopi with fresh clothes, garlands, and ornaments. I thought that was amazing. Yogamaya invisibly. she dressed and ornamented each gopi with fresh clothes, garlands, and ornaments. So the acharyas, they say that when Krishna noticed the gopis' fresh appearance, and they had changed, their fresh appearance, and they had changed so quickly from what he saw before, he couldn't understand what happened. All of a sudden, within a moment, their clothes are changed, they have new ornaments. So Krishna was like, what happened? So the acharyas conclude, quote, such is Yogamaya's expertise. Such is Yogamaya's expertise. Purnamasi, Yogamaya, she's arranging all these wonderful pastimes in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Now, as news of the Rasa Dance spread throughout the universe, the demigods and their wives crowded the skies over Vrindavan in their airplanes to watch the Rasa Dance. They're hovering above in their flower airplanes to watch the Rasa Dance. But Shastra says, it makes a very interesting observation at this point. It says that because the demigods are in the mood of servitorship, for the most part, and not above the modes of material nature, their ability to see the Rasa Dance was limited. What does that mean? It means they could only see Krishna dancing. But then it goes on to say, but the demigods' wives, their mood is a little different than servitorship. The males are thinking, they're in the servitorship mode, which is fine. But they can't see anything but Krishna dancing, the men. But their wives, it's described, desiring to serve Krishna in an amorous mood, a loving mood. They not only saw his dancing, but they also saw his loving exchanges with the gopis. So the acharyas comment on that. They conclude that the demigods' wives were more privileged than their husbands. More privileged than their husbands. Now, at the start of the Rasa Dance, the gopis showed that they had indeed accepted Srimati Radharani as their superior. How so? By encouraging her to stand beside Krishna at the center of their circle, the beginning of the dance. And as this divine dance began, various gopis began to play musical instruments, as well as they were accompanied by Gandharvas and Apsaras from heavenly planets. They also joined in with their instruments. Now, some of the instruments the gopis played were made by Vrindadevi. She made a tambura for Radharani. She made a veena for Lalita, a sarangi for Sudevi, and a santur for Indulekha. And as Krishna and the gopis danced together, the gopis' earrings swayed, flowers fell from their hair, and their ankle bells chimed. Their ankle bells chimed. And as the tempo increased, I was reading, the gopis also displayed various hand gestures, let us say mudras, by which they expressed the mood of their hearts. That's so nice. Their different mudras expressed the mood of their hearts. Now, in his commentaries on this Rasa Dance, Kavi Karnapura, he actually lists 12 hand gestures used by the gopis. For example, the hand gesture such as the flag, it's called pataka, the swan's head, hamsa mastaka, the lotus bud, padmakosha, and the half moon, Ardha Chandra, just to name a few. Now, as the dance continued, it's so fascinating. This is Krishna's topmost lila. We have so many details by Prabhupada's mercy and by Acharya's mercy. As the dance continued, Vishaka Asaki impressed Krishna with her melodious tunes, her melodious melodies. And I read that when Lalita repeated the same melodies, Vishaka's melodies, but even in a more wonderful way, Krishna called out to both of them in appreciation. Very nice, you have done well. So, in these and many other ways, Krishna and the gopis enjoyed each other's company. And as Krishna and the gopis danced, the sound of those tinkling anklets and ornaments were heard by the demigods, who, as a result, then gave up their habit of drinking heavenly nectar, somaras. Just to hear the tinkling of the ankle bells of Krishna and the gopis, they're very attached to this heavenly nectar, somaras. But in preference to Krishna and his pastimes and his service, they gave up drinking that heavenly nectar. And the acharyas say that the sight of dark-hued Krishna moving amongst fair complexioned gopis resembled a dark cloud passing through moonlight. The sight of dark-hued Krishna moving amongst the fair complexioned gopis resembled a dark cloud passing through moonlight. Or, they say, a sapphire bead spinning on a golden loop. A sapphire bead spinning on a golden loop. And the pairs of Krishna and the gopis in the one large circle soon formed many concentric circles. And those circles expanded or transformed into many smaller circles that all moved around Radha and Krishna in the center. So, after some time, Krishna and the gopis became tired. Actually, it's described they became exhausted. And the Rasa dance came to an end. And to cool themselves down, everyone headed towards the refreshing waters of the Yamuna River. And I was reading, they were followed by swarms of bees singing Krishna's glories. Can you imagine? The bees? Swarms of bees singing Krishna's glories. And after they had their jal keli, keli means playful, jal means water. So after Krishna and the gopis had their playful time in the water, they all returned to the shore, where everyone changed and dressed into fresh clothes. And then, until the first light of dawn, they strolled through, it's described, moonlit gardens. They drank honey wine, and they enjoyed a picnic on the Yamuna's sandy banks. Then finally, as the light of dawn became more prevalent, Krishna and the gopis all returned to their respective homes. Now, by human calculation, this Sharadiya Rasa Lila, this is the specific Rasa Lila we've been discussing over this series. By human calculation, this Sharadiya Rasa Lila, it lasted only one night. However, by the inconceivable power of Krishna's pastime potency, 1,000 ages, or a night of Lord Brahma, had miraculously passed. We read that in Krishna book, I remember very well. It actually took place at night. The whole pastime took place during the night of Lord Brahma. An interesting point also is that this Rasa dance, which happened on the full moon night of Kartik, you remember, I was reading, it actually continued every single night thereafter until Krishna left Vrindavan for Mathura. I was just like, whoa. It took place on the full moon night of Kartik, but acharyas say that it continued every night thereafter until Krishna left Vrindavan for Mathura. And you can imagine, we can get an idea, an appreciation, how much separation the gopis were feeling as a result when Krishna left. Now, one acharya says that the Saradiya Rasa dance began at Vamsivat, And it ended at Niruvan Asharadi. It ended there, at Niruvan Asharadi. But he says, but it continues eternally in the hearts of those devotees who covet the treasure of the gopis' pure service to Krishna. It continues eternally in the hearts of those devotees who covet the treasure of the gopis' pure service, their seva to Krishna. Hare Krishna. Now, sometimes it is that unscrupulous persons question Krishna's dancing with young girls at night in the forest in the moonlight. And to dispel such doubts, our Shukadev Goswami in Bhagavatam, he compares Krishna to a child playing with his own reflection. The Sanskrit is yatar bhakasva prati vibhramaha. For in reality, the gopis are all expansions of his own body in the form of his pleasure potency, like we speak of Radharani, the foremost of the gopis. She's Ladini Shakti. She's an expansion of Krishna's pleasure potency. And all these gopis are expansions of her. So his interactions with them are therefore likened to, the acharyas say, a boy playing with his own shadow. What's the harm? And again, as Shukadev Goswami pointed out, if Krishna or his pastimes have any touch of lust, or if they're to be seen as immoral, then how is it that when we hear of them, we become freed from lust? Now the great commentator, Shihari Suri, he writes in a similar way. I was reading his poetry. He says, do you think that by hearing these pastimes, you will get contaminated? You will become irreligious? You think so? Then he says, you carefully hear what I'm saying. O doubtful soul, if the Supreme Lord's activities consist of adharma, then how is it that these acts purify the sins of those who listen to them? Very similar. And furthermore, he challenges those who think that Krishna, who we know is transcendental to the world of matter, can in any way become contaminated by matter. He writes as follows, quote, a fool may ask, does the Ganges River become contaminated by impure water? Do the rays of the moon, who is the king amongst the twice-born, become impure by touching the Sudras? Does Agni fire become contaminated when burning up rejected foodstuffs? Does the sun absorb foul substances? He goes on, a person who asks such foolish questions is free to do so, but when he questions the Lord's pastimes, it's understood he's a great fool and should never raise such doubts. Quote, Hare Krishna. Now one last point. A question may arise that if all the gopis in the Rasa Dance that we described are expansions of Krishna's own body, as described by Shukadev Goswami, how then will an aspiring devotee, a sadhaka in this world, ever join the Rasa Dance in the spiritual world? Because we're jiva tattvas. And the answer is that the gopis mentioned are nitya siddhas, they're eternally liberated. They actually belong to the Shakti Tattva category. But a jiva soul who, Jiv Jago, Gaur Chandra Bole, who by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, a jiva soul who takes to and perfects, it'll take some time, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Samahatma Sadurlabhaha, who takes to and perfects Krishna consciousness while in this world, such a jiva can also one day join the Rasa Dance in the spiritual world. And once we get back to Godhead, Technically, we're also considered eternally liberated, Nityasiddhas. Although we came here for whatever reason. When you get back, you're also considered eternally liberated. It's interesting. So, we can join the Rasa Dance one day. And this is one reason that Krishna comes to this world and shows the Rasa Leela to the fallen conditioned souls, to entice us back home, back to the spiritual world. Either by seeing or hearing about this Rasa Leela, as we've attempted to do over the last few weeks, and which we should continue to do as time goes on, a conditioned soul can become inspired to take up the process of devotional service. Krishna has this, transcendental road show, for want of better words. He brings here, he shows us. And by seeing it, we become inspired. Just like, probably not the best analogy, someone goes to a movie, there's a particular theme, particular heroes, he comes out thinking, I want to be like that, I want to do that. So Krishna comes and he displays his pastimes in Gokul Vrindavan. And we didn't see them, but hearing's just as good in many ways. So this is our good fortune. We can hear about this Rasa Leela and become inspired, to become serious about the practices of Krishna consciousness. We may be far from the goal, but that's okay. At least we're going in the right way. We may be going slowly in the right direction. Someone else is going very fast in the wrong direction towards material enjoyment. But we're properly situated, as Prabhupada often said. And Confucius said, the longest journey begins with the first step. So our first steps are to accept the regulative principles of devotional service, to chant the Yuga Dharma, the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And live in the association of devotees and take up some service. Actually, Srila Prabhupada wrote to me one time, one letter, and in that letter he said that I should always follow in the footsteps of advanced devotees. Like this. So if we live in the association of devotees and we practice the simple process as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has introduced it, and Srila Prabhupada specifically has given us, we can one day attain that highest goal. Such is the power of hearing and chanting these pastimes, this pastime, the Rasa Dance. One day we can dance with Krishna. So we'll finish today with Srila Prabhupada's words from a lecture that he gave at the Mayapur Festival in 1974. Very beautiful. And I quote His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Those who come to Vrindavan should try to understand Krishna. Krishna exhibits his Leela here personally so that you may hear about him and become attracted. Oh, how can I go and play with Krishna? How can I go and dance with Krishna? How can I develop parental affection for Krishna? How can I become a tree or a blade of grass in Vrindavan so that Krishna may trample over me? This is called Krishna Prema. Krishna demonstrates his activities to give facility to the conditioned soul. This is Krishna's business. Why don't you come back to me and dance with me? Why are you rotting in this rotting dance? Mundane dance. You want association. You want sporting. Why don't you come to me and take part in my sporting with the cowherd boys? This is the invitation of Krishna. So anyone with intelligence will try to enter into the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, unquote. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. It's only by your grace we can do that. We're simply running behind you, shouting, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhupada. And thank you, devotees. This finishes our series on the Rasa Dance, and we will find another transcendental subject matter to discuss in the next couple of days and be back with you again through Transcendental Sound Vibration in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thank you so much. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Panchatattva ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, take all the fallen conditioned souls with us ki, Gaur Premanandi, Jai Jai Sisi Radhe Shyam. Hare Krishna.